Hello, hello, hello. Today I am joined by a grit cult, a cult sultant, I think it is pronounced, and a prolific Twitter phenomenon whose sprawling thread of threads you should visit and spend maybe a day or two on, maybe a bit more. And one of my favorite Twitter accounts. Welcome.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Yeah,
Nice to be here.
lovely to meet you too. You are a very elusive figure, a
Thank you.
and and also a master of branding, I have to say. There's something, quite cult-like about the way you've structured just the grid cult brand. I mean, you've got a different, adjacent, accounts and ideas that kind of surround your persona. But it's all just, I don't know, there's something magnetic about it. And you've kind of, in a way, appropriated also this retro future look, which I find super cool. So I don't know,
Yeah.
you definitely know what you're doing in terms of magnetizing people. And it's not just the aesthetics of it, obviously, but it's also the content. As I said, it's just sprawling. You've got thousands of different interests, and I think your threads are a testament to that. So I definitely recommend that everyone go and follow you.
Well, it's very high praise, and thank you for it.
Yeah, well, my pleasure. Yeah, I mean, we're now at the age of some people call it turmoil. Some people are sitting on the sidelines applauding it. It's January 2021. History is happening in real time. I want to ask you, because you're usually in the business of making predictions, which is something that few people engage in with quite the zeal and zest that you do.
Interesting.
But what do you? I mean, are you applauding what is going on? By that I mean, the revolutions online and partially also in person that have kind of shaped our discussions now.
I'd say that there is one large meta trend, and that is just there's this notion of decentralization happening, and recent events. I'm not sure when this will be released, but I'm pretty sure, even if it's released in a year's time, there'll be something, that's very relevant to this, what I'm going to describe, and that is, the effect of decentralization, the effects of technology, allowing people to have better access to one another. This, it's crazy to think that, people being in having easier contact with one another on a large scale, and it's never been done in history on this scale, and that's going to have huge repercussions in just basically almost everything. So at the time of this recording, I'm not sure when the person will be listening, could be 10 years from now, but at the time of recording, there is there's an event with GameStop, and I'm sure the very recent listeners will understand. But honestly, I think in 6 months' time, people will start to forget about this, and they'll look back in a year's time, like we did last January, and we're like, oh shit, that actually happened. So yeah, I think it's good to like add context to a very recent event. So in that, yeah, so essentially what happened, there was a bunch of I don't know the exact word to call them, autists maybe, on Reddit, and they essentially found the short positions of a large hedge fund, and they tried to raise the position on that, and short squeeze a hedge fund, and this has had huge repercussions, and then markets were reacting all over. Crypto markets reacted in unison as well, and it just adds more chaos to the world. And this is just one atomic fact of being able to communicate easier with people, and being able to organize large groups of people has had this massive effect.
Yeah, it's kind of populism aided by scale, and this is the arena where we can see things shine, because obviously through the natural political process, you can make changes through voice, but it doesn't seem to be like we're in the age of voice. We're in the age of some form of digitally mediated exit, and you kind of see it in in many ways, you know, people congregating, creating their own platforms, and like you said,
Yeah.
decentralization. So it feels kind of scary, but it's kind of like, I don't know, like base jumping. You know, you kind of, you know, you have a parachute and you know it probably will open, but
Yeah.
it's, we're kind of on the precipice now, and we're jumping into this decentralized world. And
Hmm.
it's, I don't know, maybe also because I'm a little bit of a, you know, tech Luddite. I'm a bit more scared than your average Joe, but it does seem like, you know, there's a new age coming. And I know you are, I don't know if it's fair to say that you're a techno optimist, but you're definitely someone who likes to use technology as a tool and make, you know, more than the best of what we have. So do you see that, you know, as a way of giving people an advantage in the world that's coming?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think being sort of open-minded to the possibilities of technology, but I also think it has to be in good faith, and you also got to recognize that technology is a tool to aid rather than replace, in a sense. And obviously technology does replace certain things, but I think the main forefront should be, you know, how you execute certain things rather than, you know, just focusing on technology. I'm not the kind of guy that will be standing outside Apple and waiting and you know, being a consumerist. I definitely think that technology will have a lot of benefits, but it also comes with a lot of downsides. And me personally, I recognize the downsides of these, you know, quote unquote Luddites. But at the same time, I definitely see that technology can be good, but it also has to be used in a certain way. There is, I don't know, there's no good culture around how we use modern technology. There's, you know, people either are ignorant of it, or they're very like nerdy, and maybe nerdy is a kind of wrong word, but they are they they basically, you know, treat it as a lifestyle. Whereas if you look at other technologies, such as, for instance, bread making, there's an entire culture around it, and it's that there's an ascetic sense to it. And I don't think that the current technology has been around long enough, or it's changing too quick for there to develop a culture that, you know, has some sort of harmonious feedback loop. And the nature of our technology is changing so much, and it's still being, you know, it's still hijacking our feedback loops in a sense. But I think once we reach a stable point where we're able to turn off the computer without our brains, you know, turning to mush, I think that will reach a good point. I don't know how far off in the future that is, but there is definitely a demand for, you know, safer technology in terms of, you know, social media, etc. And I'm very confident that, you know, there will be some sort of, you know, pushback against, you know, these techno corporatist overlords that, you know, are currently basically running whole sections of society in a sense. And yeah, there's already pushback, I think, and I think that will continue to increase. But yeah, I wouldn't say I'm a techno optimist per se. That's quite a large, broad term. I wouldn't really know what to call myself other than I just see the benefits of technology.
Yeah, absolutely. And it does seem to me like we're at the point where there is a bit of a divide, you know, kind of a chasm between a techno woke elite where people kind of understand what the downside is, and the plebs who are like, you know, the people at the bottom who are kind of enthralled with these feedback loops, and you know everything from
Yeah,
food to TV to, you know, whatever, all these like hyper perfected, hyper palatable products that, you know, were
yeah,
just iterated into existence by the market, which, you know, is what it does. And at the moment there, you kind of see this kind of technological slavery happening at the bottom, but the
yeah,
people at the top, you know, are like Jack or like someone, you know, they're
yeah.
already starting to look like Orthodox monks, and, you know, they're going on 1,000-day
Mm.
retreats and hiding in a bunker, and, you know, there's just kind of this kind of
Yeah,
asceticism happening at the top. And I feel like once the elite culture becomes visibly ascetic, then maybe just by mimesis, you know, people at the bottom will start to kind of understand that, you know, it's not all upside. There is, you know, you need to moderate this. But then obviously, because, you know, humans are black and white thinkers, there's going to be probably a huge backlash and going to be like some form of, you know, neo-Amish shit happening, and people just, you know, hiding in the forest, running around naked. You know, it's all possible. And I'm here.
No, I think that's already happening. I think there's this on Twitter. There's this wave of people with pine trees, and they were just reading Kaczynski. They were spending all the time on Twitter, obviously, but you know they were echoing these sentiments of, you know, returning to nature and, you know, abandoning this tech dystopia in a sense. And I think that's already happening. I think that will continuously to happen. I think the people that are trying to do that, they're going to form their own in real life communities, and, you know, they're going to live their own life. And I've been saying for quite a while that it's the future is not it's not going to be one blanket state of let's say The Matrix, for instance, or any other future film you want to watch. It's going to be multiple simultaneous futures existing at once. So you're going to have the jetstones, so, you know, the liberal tech guys who've integrated, you know, mechanical toes and stuff, and the Kaczynski guys who don't like to modern medicine, and, you know, they don't want insulin, for instance. So those two kind of like societies can coexist. So it'll be the jetstones and the flintstones, you know, not in harmony, but they're going to be in their own, you know, decentralized communities.
Yeah, it's you know, it would be hard to imagine the war between the Jetstones and the Flintstones, but I feel like the Jetstones, you know, they have a very intrinsically fragile system, you know, because in a way the Flintstones are just, you know, they're like a dog eat dog, you know, they're essentially culling genetically with every generation. They have no modern tools. They're essentially, you know, survival of the fittest. So in a few
Yeah.
generations, kind of the very frail, you know, hyperscale of the Jetsons might just be torn down by a few very, very well placed, you know, battle rocks from from the Flintstones faction.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's an interesting thought experiment. And I think the problem is now with the Jetsons faction, you know, the kind of hyper liberal technocrats, is that, man, they can't stand the Flintstones. They don't want them around. You know, it's pretty hard to see them coexist, except for, you know, separatism, which people are talking about more now, but it's still kind of a fringe idea. But I think there's some value to it. You know, just leave each other alone, people. It's obvious that we can't, you know, coexist in that utopian manner.
So I mean, in terms of when you've got large scale of people, you're gonna have, you know, increase the number of people that are essentially, you know, with different fractious views. So I mean, one solution is the Chinese solution, and, you know, that's totalitarianism, implement, you know, top-down rigid hierarchical systems, and, you know, enforce, you know, a lot of enforce an ideological framework for people to operate within. Then you got like the West and America, and I try to compare this between, you know, Persia and the ancient Greek city-states. So in the West, you're gonna have multiple different. There is one, like, I don't know. People in the West, they think that they are open-minded, but in a sense, their liberalism is very, you know, do or die. But I mean, ignoring that fact, there will be, I think, some sort of fracture in the West, whereby there'll be different communities and ideologies existing in one, you know, within a larger meta community in a sense. And I think, I think I tweeted out like for maybe 2018 that America will be at risk of fracture. And basically, the reason why I made that statement was that you can't have so many different diverging political opinions within one kind of like melting pot, let's say. And the reason why is because, you know, they're just going to they're just going to get into conflict, and, you know, be able not see eye to eye on a lot of things. And this will at the start, you know, it's at the bottom level, and, you know, it's only the plebs, but obviously this gets fed back into the entire system. So you're going to have more and more people within the lawmaking system and the political system that are going to be more and more fringe, and you know, they're going to have a market. I always say, like, politics is just another, you know, salesman in a sense. So they're going to have another market that's more fringe and applies to people on that's completely divergent. I wouldn't say it's populism. Like it's so different from populism in the sense that it's not just one way; it's going multiple different directions. And I think that's it ties back to my meta trend statement I made earlier, was that this is a force of decentralization. So you're going to have you can have right-wing Kaczynski people, you can have left-wing decelerationist. There's so many different words for this because they all operate in their own little tribe, and so these little tribes are gonna coalesce and move apart every now and again. It's gonna be complete, a movement of bodies, for instance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that that's probably representative of what's going to happen, but I don't see it happening without a lot of friction. I mean, everyone's been talking about civil war. Do you think that's an option, or that people are just not at that level at the moment?
I don't think civil war is it's possible, but I don't think it will happen. I think if it were to happen, which I have a probability scale of every event happening, and subsequent events in different timeline branches, for instance, will have different probability factors. But essentially, it wouldn't go that route in my opinion, because that would be you'd have to have too much one-way force, and that's not the nature of the decentralization. What will probably happen is states seceding, or there'll be motions to secede. So since when I made that statement of that there may be fracture in the United States, was I've seen an increase of people, Texans for instance, talking about these notions of seceding from the United States and forming their own country. There are movements for these, and and it's not just libertarians, for instance, or it's not just conservatives. It's a wide range of people that are pushing for these movements. So yeah, it's very fractious. And I think one thing we're going to see, and I'm seeing a lot of movements in general geopolitics, of people wanting to create their own country and secede from other countries.
Yeah, I've
Yeah.
seen a lot of that as well. I mean, there's quite a lot of people kind of on this libertarian techno utopian side that are physically building villages and small cities now. I'm curious how the local authorities, the power of the state, will take that, or is it going to be just yeah.
So local authorities, their worst case scenario is a fracture. Because if you lose a group of population of people, you're going to lose, revenue. And if you see business as if you see a company as a business, then they're essentially going to be against that. I think so. In one instance, there's a few secession movements in Asia. So China, the Xinjiang, I think there's a secessionist movement, and what they did was that would have been completely fractious, because they people don't realize with China, it's they'll with all countries really, there's multiple factions all at play at once, and it's very easy to put another faction and prop them up. And I think that's been the CIA playbook for quite a while. So um, what China did essentially, they moved the people, and they set up these detention camps. I don't know if that's true or not. That's just the information I've been fed, but it's also similar to, for instance, in India, there's a movement for secessionism, for a secessionist state within India, and it's called Khalistan, and that's based on a different religion. So the Sikhs in India, they want to secede from what they see as a Hindu state. But the thing is, this is a mirroring another effect that we've already seen happen in 2016, and that was Brexit. And essentially, what happened was Britain voted to move away from the EU, and I wasn't too surprised. If you look back in history, Britain has always, in a sense, been its own nation, much like how Japan is in relation to larger Asia. So with Britain, they essentially, and I compared it to King Henry seceding from the Catholic Church, for instance, and he went his own way and cut himself off from there. But essentially, it's very similar in that sense. And then within England, you've got different secessionist movements. So you've got this movement for Scottish independence and Northern Ireland and Wales, and then you've even got even smaller regional secessionists. So they want to decentralize parliament. So so for instance, Yorkshire's got a movement of instituting their own ruling body or government, and then Cornwall as well. Which is these are very like minute. I don't think wide-ranging listeners in Silicon Valley would have heard of these kind of things, but I mean I'm just noticing these things on multiple different levels. So there's regional, then national, international, etc. So like these all these different things are pointing to one thing, and that's a decentralization of literally everything. And I'm a big supporter of localization. I think current bodies of state, they can't you can't it's very hard to have a small group of elite to rule a wide, large body of people. And I think the Roman Empire tried this. They tried to have a representative um, republic or whatever, and essentially it didn't work. You'd have some factions vying for power and other factions fighting each other, and essentially what happened was they instituted an emperor, and Pax Romana happened, and they spread their culture, etc., and survived for a very long time. The other path that we're at is essentially we just decentralize. We're one large Greek state. We're gonna turn into a bunch of cities, states, which I'd probably personally prefer, if I'm honest.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I feel like each of these city states, there's just kind of that libertarian thought experiment of having competition between regions, and I
Yep.
think that's a really good argument, and I buy it, because you see that there are different experiments in lifestyle, different experiments in governance, and we can
Yep.
all learn from either each other, or just exit and either replicate the model that we see works, or just join if they'll let us. So yeah, I think this is it's happening so fast, which is kind of the scary part, but I feel like it's a good direction. So yeah, I think I hope your predictions are on the money with this one, because it's probably the only way to solve this with minimal violence and
Yeah.
conflict. You also had a really good thread that I mean, I thought it was really good because it mirrors some of my own thoughts about death culture and the lack of a death
Oh
culture
yeah.
in Western society at the moment. I feel like this plays really well into the current moment, which is not as current anymore, but it's still prolonged, which is COVID-19, this monster pandemic that's been eating up the world. And I feel like the two things that have been highlighted by this for me is essentially the impotence of managerialism, this absolutely no skin in the game, like 15-tier system that surrounds us, with all these with all these little bureaucrats trying to cover their asses. No one's really it's a completely inefficient system. But at the same time, also the kind of the moral underpinnings. Like we went from save the NHS, don't overwhelm the hospitals, to we must conquer death, which is an absolutely insane perspective. But I feel like it overlaps pretty well with what the current vibe is about around death. We are in complete denial of death, and yeah, I feel like
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know, just reintegrating some serious concept of death, of old age, of dying, of respect for people over 40 even, is something that we're sorely lacking in our society.
That's very interesting. You mentioned that. Like right now, what I've got on my desktop is like a bunch of images that just like skulls, and I can send you a picture after or something. And essentially, they're yeah, it's like I don't know. Me personally, I was raised very much in a very conservative household, and I don't know, a lot of things that I may tweet may not reflect that, but essentially there's this whole culture of death in the sense that I was told at a very young age that everyone dies, and it was a fact of reality, and that kind of stuck with me. And I think it's a very huge part of my personality that I'm constantly motivated by death, and there is an aesthetic of death per se. It's a sort of state that's romantic in a sense, and I think it is definitely lacking in modern society. I think people shy away from it, and there's not an acceptance of it because people like tend to forget about it, and then there's a whole bunch of cultural problems that relate to that and stem from that. So for instance, you have no job culture, so you don't think that there's wisdom in old age. And I think one of the weird things is because the world's changed so quick, the relevance of ancient, like a person who's had certain knowledge like 50 years ago, that's so redundant now. Like if you look at technological systems, or even how the world works, or how people even interact through globalism, it's definitely changed. And I can definitely understand certain reasons as to why people disregard certain things. But I think in terms of death, I don't think people have an appreciation or a realistic understanding of it. And then there's this whole fear of death that comes from that. And I'm not sure where this death thing specifically came from myself, but I definitely think that everything that I try to do is like it will try to be the end in mind. So I remember the first kind of um, video essay. I don't know what to call it, but the first kind of video essay I made like 2 years ago now was based on my death, and it was essentially a I don't know if you've read it, but it was almost my own eulogy, and I was basically explaining some things about how a person can, in a sense, replicate a cyber death. So this, you said I was good at branding, but essentially what I'm trying to play around with is all these different, I wouldn't say identities, but we're at a point where your avatar is essentially a reflection of you in a sense. It's a mask. So if you kill these kind of masks, you're killing, in a sense, a part of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one facet of this new reality that we're in. But on a larger sense, I think that should be just that should be incorporated into everything. And there's no reminders of death in modern society, so there's a lot of things. So you have people that are repeating very age-old mistakes, and they think they can reinvent the wheel per se, because they are forgetting I wouldn't say ancient wisdom, but they're definitely missing something. And this goes back to this whole notion of throwing the baby out with the bathwater per se. And I think that's what happens when people try to rebel too much against tradition. And then you got to find this kind of balance between, I don't know. I'm just trying to like loop everything back into our conversation. So like, you got to have some sort of tradition, and this is why I was talking about like a culture around technology, because the world's moving so quick. It's very hard to keep track of certain things. So in a sense, there is no ancient wisdom being passed down. So, and with tradition, it's like what tradition is a sense is a set of um, memes per se. If you go that route, it's a set of memes that have been refined through time. So through Darwinian evolution of memes or ideas, like certain good ideas have been bred and they've proliferated, and then certain bad ideas, they've been tried and tested, obviously, and the bad ones go. I think that's what's happening in real life, and that's what always will happen. And then there's this whole nature of perennial philosophy that people rediscover things, but in a sense they just discover them in a real way because humans, and in their hubris, I think they can, in a sense, again, reinvent the wheel.
Yeah, I think it's also a question of what is knowledge, because I feel like we've identified a lot with scientific knowledge, with technological prowess, with knowing how to operate things.
Oh yeah.
But the idea that wisdom is a separate category of knowledge, and that it's, there's kind of an intuitive component to it. There's even kind of a instinctive component to wisdom. That's anathema now. You don't really have people accepting that. Maybe a little bit in people who are interested in Eastern culture and Eastern religion and things like that. It's kind of being reintegrated, but it kind of has to be brought in through the back door. So because the Western religious traditional and wisdom traditions are really hard to they're not very palatable for the young hip millennial crowd. So you kind of have to have to get wisdom from somewhere exotic, and it has to have some packaging that's cooler. But the idea that knowing how to operate a computer is the same type of knowledge as knowing how to live a good life. they're completely different magisteria. And like you said, it's logical to ignore your grandfather when
Yep.
he opines about, I don't know, GameStop or something, because probably doesn't know what he's talking about. But it's maybe good to listen to him because he's had experiences,
Yeah.
physical, physiological, intuitive experiences throughout his life that have, taught him some lessons about stuff that you will not know until you hit that thing in reality.
No, definitely. And I think, yeah, I mean, like if you go back to the the age of industrialization, so um, like my grandfather probably lived a hectic life as well, went to war, etc. And his grandfather before him had a very, um, you know, chaotic life as well. There was different states being implemented, and he had a hand in that per se. And so I think this nature of chaos, I think the last 20 years since the fall of the Berlin Wall, there's been this sort of sense of normality. But then 10 years later, we had this 9/11, and then you know society changed very rapidly for a sect of people in a very different side of the world. And I think people are very myopic in the sense that they only see 6 months at a time either direction. So their sense of normality. So like people have already adjusted to this Corona stuff, and we just adapted, and technology trends have taken us in one direction and COVID in another. So I think that's one aspect of it, is that people have a very short attention span and memory span, whereby a lot of these things that they think are chaotic or new are not that new. If you look at history, there's been multiple instances where states fall and rise, and people are in a sense living a different type of lifestyle. And I think there's also this atomization aspect.
Yeah, absolutely.
One
And
second. One sec. I was just my I've got auto close on my tabs, and it was trying to close the podcast up. But yeah, back to my point. Essentially, so we've got these atomic beings basically being propped up, right? And what's happening is you're seeing an increase in surrogate fathers, not in the conventional sense, but rather there'll be like these conventional gurus. That are offering father as a service. So you'll have these gurus that will basically tell you, hey, clean up your room, boy, and then you'll solve the world. And these, I think these are going to increase because there is a need for it, there's a demand for it. And there was this one meme I posted, and it was Ted Kaczynski saying, "You're always on your phone." And there's a soy Wojak like with his face open, and the guy was just basically ignoring his mum, who'd basically told him the same kind of thing. So that's I think that's a very like that's a funny thing to remind ourselves of, not get caught up in this humanistic hubris that is common to our species in a sense. Yeah.
Exactly. I think the void in father figures is a really big, not necessarily a trend, but it's a big phenomenon in culture.
Yep.
Either because fathers are actually absent, because fatherlessness is quite a huge phenomenon just in terms of practical matters. There are literally no fathers in the home, but also the fathers that we do have are quite a watered down version of the father archetype. They've become very mild, at impact
Oh yeah.
with the culture that we have. And there's obviously there's a downside to what people call toxic masculinity, like that super authoritarian, violent father figure that will not take no for an answer, and he bends his family to his will. And that's kind of a scary archetype as well. He represents violence, he represents kind of the leviathan of the family. But at the same time, we've just let society just be completely devoured by the opposite archetype, which is the devouring mother. The big state, the enveloping womb, the culture of safetyism. This denial of death. because you know, if you're never born, or if you're in the permanent womb, you never get to die, because you're protected. We protect everyone from everything. And the thing is, these archetypes are meant to balance each other out.
Yeah.
But because we have almost nothing, too little of one thing, and you know, this all-encompassing hydra on the other end, you know, it's quite off kilter. So I don't know, to me that feels like it's a big thing as well. So I see why you why you say that, you know, the digital guru is going to be the next, yeah, the next father figure. But is it, I don't know, is it enough to have this digital idol? Or if you have 10 of them, it's better than one you know, imperfect one at home?
I think it's more a case of like, this is the situation and this is the solution in a de facto sense. Quickly, could you just do a sanity check? I'm no longer seeing your screen.
Uh-oh. I think it's recording. I am here. I see everything from your end, and then your audio is still recording as well.
Okay, cool. I just want to make sure. Cool. But I can't see you. So, anyways, I'll just carry on. Yeah, it's a father sense. In the father, I don't know. All right. So, I mean, I can only give, like, you know, my kind of background, I suppose. So, with me, my I did come from a, what would be called patriarchal, but it's just normal, and I wasn't really um brainwashed by, you know, in a sense, like feminism or liberalism, that each person's an atomic thing. I was very much had the sense of family values embedded in me. So, for instance, like what I do definitely reflects what, like the status of my family in a sense, and you know that was a very big part of everything in you know, how I conducted myself, and I think that was good. I think that was good because it, in a sense, realigned my values. So if I was going to do something very short term or hedonistic, then I'd think that this conflicts with what my values were as a child, in the sense that you know, everything I do would reflect, you know, a body of people larger than myself, and then, you know, that kind of, in a sense, embeds a sort of honor into you, or honor culture. And I think one thing that we're currently missing in current society is an honor culture. There are definitely negative aspects to honor culture, and obviously those are, for instance, you know, increased violence and increased, you know, more masculine attributes that are, you know, typically associated with, you know, the animal kingdom. So that's one, but I think that's very much human nature as well. So, and um, I don't think we can engineer ourselves out of human nature. And it goes back to my point again, whereby this we've got to live in harmony with technology. But me personally, like this whole father figure thing, I think I was raised with a quite harsh father. Some would say I've been kicked out multiple times. It was quite a rocky relationship, and he was very harsh. He was very much like, you can do what you want, just don't be a fuck up, or like at least do something respectable. And that was more or less it. I was, you know, I was given free reign, and when I fucked up, he did bail me out from, you know, some very serious situations, and helped me out a lot on that. And when I needed guidance, he was there. But I think he also recognizes in himself that he was very much a young father. He had me when he was younger than me, actually. You know, at my age, I'm what, 25 now. He 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 had a 2-year-old son, which was me. So there's that kind of disconnect as well. So he, in a sense, was figuring out how to be a father, and he spent a lot of time working and stuff, and just being very direct to the point, given all this responsibility. And I feel as though he definitely stepped up in that sense, because, you know, that's a huge burden. I just try to think of it myself. You know, raising a kid right now would you know, would clash with my lifestyle, and that's, I think that's a very modern symptom. And um and I think a lot of people try to make that decision, and I think some people are moving away from it. You know, people who are economically able, because you don't want to give your child a bad life per se as well. You know, if you're unable to provide for them, etc. But I think a lot of people are just have this fear, whereby they think it's a lifestyle choice rather than you know, continuing your family in a sense. So I don't know, kind of rambling around the drain around that point, but what I'm essentially trying to say is that there is definitely a need for looking back retroactively and trying to learn the mistakes of people that came before us. And I think, you know, some of your questions lined up quite nicely in the sense of, you know, deaf. There's no deaf culture which, you know, extends past the father, and then is there father now? I don't think so. So I think there's an increase in gurus, and I think another point I was trying to make was that there's an increase in online manaband. So there's, you know, groups of males online that, you know, find solace in these male only groups. I think that is a fact of nature. So if you look, there's a good essay a couple of years ago that described male only cults, and I think it's a historical phenomena. So with me, like, there's like, you know, groups, I'm in like group chats with just men only, you know, just like, you know, we just random posting and, you know, shooting the shit essentially. And I think that's a very needed thing. And I think with the last 10 years or so, this kind of dynamic has changed where the, you know, friendship group of males has changed, and there's been no constructive feedback loop, um, you know, due to just society changing, globalism, etc., people not having a sort of interaction. And now we're kind of seeing that these groups are recoalescing and migrating on the internet and interacting with one another almost every day. And, you know, there isn't, you know, cyber or mana bond, if you call it that, where a group of men just basically reinforce one another. And yeah, it's a very interesting cultural phenomenon.
Yeah, and it's an outlet. I mean, I guess you know, people will do what people do with the tools that they have at hand, and you're right. I mean, I've been talking about this as well with the disappearance of gender segregated spaces, because now when you talk about gender segregated, you know, everyone's haunches are up. They're like, oh, you know, discrimination, but like you said, there are dynamics, there are ways of life, there are thought patterns and things that can only exist
Yeah.
and only flourish within these gender segregated spaces. You know, if you look back at traditional communities, there was this world of women, and there was the world of men, and the men did their manly things and the women did their womanly things, and you know, there's quite a bit of harmonious existence. Obviously, not to romanticize it, but there was such a thing, and it's, you know, if it was if it's robust and if it's something that existed for thousands of years until we decided that no, everything has to be co-ed, everything has to be merged. It doesn't mean necessarily that we've improved society and made it more.
I think definitely. I think, yeah. Again, it's this whole myopia, and I think it comes from a Marxist notion. I definitely think that Marxism is a downstream of no, sorry, feminism is downstream of Marxism, and then we're currently in the post-feminist world in the West specifically, and so we're seeing everything in that kind of lens already. So you have these kind of people who are, you know, for instance, Christopher Hitchens, or I don't know, the, you know, current establishment, you know, shill proxy guy at the moment. You know, there's a new one with a buck. Sam Harris is one. Ben Shapiro is probably one as well. So essentially, those guys, they're you know, they are, you know, arguing for feminism in a sense, even though they say they're against feminism, because the world truly, like, if you were to go way beyond that, then, you know, you reach this sort of feudalism kind of age where there is a huge, what they see as barbaric. So their way of making models in the world is already influenced by by Marx per se. So for instance, like Jordan Peterson, like he'd say he's for certain liberalism, but like liberalism in a sense is very, you know, we're already in liberalism. Like, how much more liberalism do you want? That's the counter argument I make to those kind of people. And then this other side of it, if I can remember the point, was that, yeah, so when I'm making, like, when I'm talking about technology, what I'm really talking about is biology. And I definitely think that biology has more of an influence on future events than technology. Technology is, you know, it's definitely up there, you know, but I think biology, like, if you look at history, and there's a good book called Will Durant, 100 pages of history or something along those lines. It's probably the best book on history you're going to read in your life. And essentially, one of the statements that it makes, or meta statements, is that patterns repeat in history because there's a similar kind of operating system, or similar kind of computer that operating systems run on, and that is biology. And we have similar kind of patterns of coalescing into giant empires crushing, and crumbling essentially. And there's this repeatable cycle. I think mainly that is due to biological hardware, pushing us to one direction. And like, again, it goes back to the point of male-only spaces or female-only spaces. Like, we've got to understand we're living in a very small window. And then then it goes back to your point on progress, confusing scientific progress with moral progress. Those two things they should be treated as separates. So, for instance, in ancient Carthage, they'd set, like, abortion was quite prevalent, and women had abortion. They would sacrifice a child, for instance. So, I mean, I've tried to mirror those two things. I don't know if that's a good comparison right there, but it's definitely something, to think about. So, for instance, a lot of these things that are very liberal now, people, call quote unquote progress, are not. This definitely happened before, but we're just very ignorant of the past, in the sense that, we're seeing it in a new light. We're seeing it as a win, but, like, what's down the road is, in a sense, the cycle is gonna repeat. And then it goes back to this point I was making earlier regarding the quote unquote conservatives of modern society. They're not really conservative, in the sense that their conservatism only goes back 5 years, and if there would be a progressive 10 years ago, and we're really at that stage where yeah, like Ben Shapiro and all these other PSN. I mean, I got respect for them. They're good at writing books and selling them, whatever. But essentially, like, if they were to go back 100 years, they'd be called left-wing extremists. So I think that's one thing to keep in mind as well, is that a lot of these people think they are reinventing the wheel. I think it comes back to human hubris. Like, people think, oh, I'm so special. I've developed X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
And then I think it also comes down to people thinking they're immortal, or they could be immortal. And I think one thing I admired about the Romans is that they had this, like, notion of Memento Mori, and I've definitely tried to take that on board, not in a Stoic sense, but rather in a new type of death sense. So I think humans, or biological animals in a sense, they have this notion of a death sense, whereby they can, they have a sort of relationship to it. And I've been trying to cultivate that in myself, surrounding myself by reminders of death. As I'm talking to you, I'm literally looking at my Memento Moris, which are plastered over the wall above my desk, and they're just skulls that I drew. I think I've posted a few before. But yeah, these skulls, like, I think in a sense, just remind me that you're just a man, in a sense, and you will die. And personally, this like, as a young kid, this was imbued into me, through a very orthodox religious upbringing, and it's very traditional in a sense. And then you are a man before God, you will die. Relax. Don't be too crazy with hubris. And I think a lot of people are very subject to hubris.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm also a big fan of the kind of the vanitas, Memento Mori imagery.
Yeah.
Like, this is an exclusive, but I have a Memento Mori tattoo, which is the only like large scale tattoo that I have. It's not that large scale, but it's you can tell, you can make it out. What it is, if obviously about the imagery.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Are you not going to reveal it? No.
No, I'm definitely above the neck poster.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's a really really important image, and it's really interesting because everyone around me knows that I love this imagery. So I have friends who are artists who have
Yeah.
actually painted Memento Mori and like Vanitases for
Oh
me,
wow.
and I have them around the house. So yeah, this is a really important thing for me as well, which I don't have it from my family. I've kind of found my way to it because
Yeah.
I like kind of this stoical concept of premeditatio malorum, to think
Yeah.
about what can go wrong and to kind of sit with that, and then it's really the best way to have perspective on your life, because especially being in the pod, eating the bugs, being forced to be
Yeah.
this this atomized being, perspective is not something you get. You're always kind of caught into the cycles,
Oh,
the news
totally.
cycles, the stuff. So anything, even like cold therapy, or just like exposing yourself to something like to shocks or things like that, is really important to kind of ground you, or whatever term you want to use, to just kind of pull you out of the constant maelstrom of your mind, because
Mm.
this is the big thing that the market plays with your brain waves every day. So yeah, I'm definitely a big fan of that as well. um, I also had someone ask about Bullshit Jobs, this book by David Graeber. And I know
Yeah.
you're kind of the type of person who's created a job, who is giving jobs to other people, who is kind of in the middle of business. um, you
Yeah.
know what's your I don't know if you've read the book, but I guess the premise of it is that most of the jobs at the moment are paper pushing, making PowerPoint presentations,
Yeah.
being middle
Oh
management.
man.
What's your take on bullshit jobs, and what's the future of bullshit jobs? Will we need them? Will they increase in number?
I haven't read the book, and it would have helped if I did read the book. But okay, so there's a few points I would make. I don't agree with it in general. I think what is a bullshit job, and then so we're defining something as bullshit. So that de facto means that we've got something that is valuable. Okay, so what is value? And a lot of people say value is what you can use, utility, etc. But essentially, I am of the belief that, and this is probably very Austrian kind of school of economic thinking, is that value is whatever the market is willing to pay for it. So in a sense, there are no bullshit jobs, because if someone pays for it, then it's a job that has a demand and supply attached to it. So yeah, I don't agree with it. I think there's probably going to increase in bullshit jobs. Is an influencer a bullshit job? No, there's a demand for it. People are willing to pay for it. So who's to say that what is bullshit and what isn't? I think the entire kind of concept of it is like, oh, it goes back to the hubris again. I think it's like, all right, I'm working in a job that's very useful, etc. And you know, it's uh, it's going to help society in a sense. Okay, that's a definitely good statement to make, but in a sense, there's also this other notion that if someone's willing to pay for it, then there's demand for it, and I'm doing them a service, and I'm equally being reimbursed for my time and value. I mean, there are some jobs that are probably worth more, but then it comes down to like moral posturing. Like there's this whole wave in the last year, 2020, that there was these there's a huge backlash against these nurses that were just basically live tweeting what they were doing, and obviously it was very traumatic, and I can totally understand their position, but there's a lot of people that were um like saying, if you don't like it, get another job. And I think that definitely has definitely goes to the argument of how do you place value on certain things, what is valuable to human nature, and who's going to be the one to assign value to certain things. So I think
Yeah.
I think I think the term Marxist I think the term bullshit job is very Marxist, in the sense that it's, or I create value, you don't create value, and you're just a person that tells me what to do. Don't get me wrong, I've done things that are bullshit, totally, and I totally understand the sentiment against it, but someone was paying me to do that, and I was offering my services. So I mean, I'll give one example. Like, I was working on one thing for about 6 months, and then you know fucking senior directors or whatever, they essentially canned it, and that was a lot of effort. I learned a lot, etc. But it resulted in nothing. And then I just kind of reflected on myself, and I was like, this is I want to build something that lasts, and it goes back to this whole death thing. So everything I try to do, I try to reflect with death in mind. Will I be proud of this when I die, etc. So that was one thing where I was just, that was probably a bullshit job in that sense, but I wouldn't call it a bullshit job. It was just a job I didn't like, and wasn't very fruitful.
Yeah, I think
Um,
part of the argument, if I remember correctly, I haven't read the book, but I've kind of read about it, was that because a lot of the jobs that exist at the moment, they're just kind of a sub process in a larger machine, and it's very hard to connect the inputs with the outputs, and a lot of these services are very abstract, they're very superficial. Some of them, they're less about fulfilling needs, but more about creating desires. Some of them are actually, harmful, like, whatever you believe about, I don't know, feeding people McDonald's, a lot of people have heart disease, things like that. So, it's this kind of, in a way, the fact that you're just, a literal cog in a very huge machine is kind of an alienating thing in itself.
yeah,
But at the same time,
definitely.
yeah, I mean, obviously, in terms of market value, I completely agree with you. I mean, what is the value of a job? Not even like a old school ironmonger in like super trad society. What is he going to sell a sword for? He's going to sell a sword for whatever someone wants to pay for it, and that's it. But it's I think this, I think it's just another, chain in the link of alienation that people,
Yeah,
want to talk about. I think from that perspective,
I
there's something to it.
yeah, yeah, definitely. And a lot of left wing thinkers did say that these negative repercussions would be alienation. So, for instance, yeah, there is a sense of alienation, but I definitely believe that these kind of jobs will be weeded out. And you got to take the long-term meta perspective as well. Is that if a job is no longer needed, why would someone pay for it in the long run? Does that make sense? So, for instance, all these bullshit jobs. Like me personally, I hired someone that would be basically yesterday actually that is essentially going to just do run errands for me that are going to be very that I could probably hire a secretary to do it in the UK or America, wherever, and but I'm basically outsourcing it to someone who's going to do it a lot cheaper at the same kind of quality, and yeah, so like again, it goes back to where do you place value? I think so. If you are in a demoralizing job, um, like the market's going to change, technology is going to change, and there's going to be this whole, the whole machine is going to may not be, reliant on that one cog in a very large abstract machine. So I can't say like these things are going to be, around for a very long time. Even like the office worker, in a sense, they're dying. Offices are no longer around, So in the late 90s, there was this whole wave of anti-office. I like to call it like office pessimism, and in the 60s you have this if you have this like increasing amount of people that work in offices, from the 20s, roaring 20s, into the 50s after the war. And if you look at Mad Men, there's this whole like office culture, and they make working in office, kind of cool. I mean, at least for the men, anyways. And it was, very interesting, and that definitely, you know, was something I suppose to idealize. And then if you look at the 90s, then this is like post corporatism expanding large office buildings, and then there's quite a few movies that are very pessimistic about office culture in a sense, and you'll see this downtrodden guy in an oversized working shirt in a giant fucking tie that he's wearing, and he's just hating his job, and they kind of rebel against this kind of office culture. And now what we're seeing is obviously that kind of carried on. Then you have the like the soy guy in an office, trying to act all retro or something. I don't know, but in a sense that's failing as well. And now we're in a sense we're in a post office economy, and I don't think it'll go back to offices because it will go back to some degree, but nowhere near the same kind of degree. Like even I talked to some of my colleagues, and me myself, like I'm working across like multiple different time zones, and I'm making a lot more money now doing what I do before where I had to go to an office. There's a time spent on commuting, which reduced my effectiveness in terms of how much time I was able to allocate to work and productive stuff. So again, these bullshit jobs, I think there is a time where there's a whole bunch of like rent seeking, so people can afford these bullshit jobs. But when people are looking to cut costs, like the first thing they'll cut is like things that don't produce any value.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think the pushback against so-called bullshit jobs is also tied into what people expect from jobs? Because we've really been sold this whole mythology
Yeah,
of career, especially to women, to be honest, that
yeah,
the career is the thing that shall it shall release you. This is the fulfillment of your life, the crowning jewel of your existence.
damn.
And if you don't have this amazing thing, if on the receiving end you just get a job, which is bullshit or not, is going to maybe involve some PowerPoint or whatever.
I'm
Yeah, you're not going to be happy.
mm, yeah, I'm a big fan of family business. And I think there's quite a large stark difference between a corporate career and a family business. A family business you can hand over to your children. A corporate career, it's not replicable, and I don't think careerism will last. Then it goes back to this whole notion of decentralization, and there's huge biological forces in play that prefer passing off things to their offspring. And I don't think nepotism is bad in the sense that um, people are looking after the genetic lineage, and I don't try to associate like a morality towards it. I just think it's a fact of biology. People are gonna have propensity to people that are similar to them, create a tribe, etc. So going back to the point, careerism. I'm definitely against careerism. I definitely think you should do what you enjoy. If you enjoy that kind of work, then by all means go ahead and do it. Um, but I definitely think you should also try to build something on the side and do that, and be in more control over your destiny. Being totally reliant, and again, being totally reliant on someone is not a modern phenomena. Like in ancient societies, you'd have fief lords, fiefdoms and fief lords or whatever, and you'd pledge your life to a person, etc. um, I'm not trying to compare corporatism to that, but I'm just saying that there is this notion of reliance on other people for certain things. But I think right now everyone should be able to have some degree of control over what they do. And before, a lot of libertarians would argue that now we have freedom, etc., to work. Um, but a lot of these things are a run to the lowest common denominator, and these things will ruin a lot of other things that have been around a lot longer. So this notion of family has probably been, and not just family, not the nuclear family, like extended family, living, knowing your cousins and grandparents, etc. That kind of like extended family model has been around to some degree all across cultures. A lot of you know I don't know, people that look into genetics would say, they'll reference the Hajnal line. I don't really agree with that, because even with if you have the Hajnal line, maybe households are slightly different, but you still be in close proximity to people that were very closely related to you. So in that sense, um, there's this careerism. I don't think it will last. I think we're seeing an increase in like personal businesses, family, and this will lead to like an increase in family businesses. I don't know how that ties in with this, increase in corporatism and gig economy. Maybe I'm looking at it from my perspective, and I'm biased in that sense because I grew up around family business, and one of the things that I've been asked recently is whether or not when am I going to start my business and when am I going to, you know, do that, and that's the mindset I was kind of raised with, and obviously that does not translate across humanity. But I definitely think that has a lot of positives. You want to pass something down, you want to build, and again, it goes back to death. You want to build something that outlasts you. You want to be remembered in a certain way. So, are the actions that you're doing today going to reflect positively or negatively? Would you be proud of what you've done, and will you be able to hand it over if there is anyone to hand it over with? Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
that requires that seeing beyond your generation, seeing beyond your youth even, which I
Yeah.
feel like is quite a limited perspective at the moment. And to me, I feel like this perspective is also kind of mediated by the fact that, you know, the thing that we interact with most is, you know, the global market. That's, you know, we don't really interact with family as much. You know, there's certain communities that still do, where you have extended families, but it is a rarity. So
Yeah.
the market wants you to be at peak optionality. It wants to give you, you know, the variety, you know, just make you into the peak consumer. And I think the peak consumer is still, you know, the two income households, you know, millennial Zoomer type person who's, you know, an early adopter, is in on all the cool things. And, you know, because the market's prototype consumer is typically this person, they're essentially, even the cultural products that surround the market, they all cater to this person. And, you know, once you fall off into your 40s, into the dark gray, you know, murkiness of older age, you're not really the core consumer. You're not really this whole thing that we're in, the network economy. It doesn't really cater to you that much. You know, there are certain products for you, but, you know, culture isn't about you. You know, when you turn on the means of communication, you know, it's all people, you know, between 20 and 35, you know, staring back at you. And I feel like there's not really that much, you know, of a cultural artifacts that are oriented towards older people, except for things that are funny to us, like, you know, they watch a Jeopardy or something, haha, they're old. But, you know, there's not really something high status. It's really very low status to get old in these conditions that we're in.
Interesting. No, I totally agree. And I'm what, like 25, and then there'll be like kids younger than me calling me a boomer. No, I actually find it funny, and I don't discourage it in a sense, because yeah, because what I do as well, like I call people that are like around 30, 35, I call them boomer, and they hate it as well. But I find it so hilarious. But yeah, so it's essentially targeting youth. It's a growth tactic in a sense. So, for instance, TikTok, they primarily aimed at kids who are, you know, 15, etc., and they essentially, yeah, so they aimed at kids that are 15, and they grew. They had a lot of time on their hands, so you could have a very dedicated user base, and I think that's part of it. You know, older people, they work, they've got other things, they're busier, they have less time to able to, you know, spend on, you know, their social media or product or whatever. I think there will be, I think, I don't think there'll be like a high status cultural increase anytime soon. I think there will be some sort of thing where people who've done really extraordinary things, you know, they're usually held up in high status as they get older. But also, like, a lot of things change, so a lot of cultural norms are changing. So if something, even if someone was a liberal, say 50 years ago, now they can be considered a conservative, and you know, we're in a very fast-moving time, so that's another aspect of it. So their like kind of views have just fallen out of time, and you know, out of this zeitgeist.
Mhm.
And so yeah, that's one aspect of it, I suppose. And the other aspect is, you know, people are using, you know, these new apps for aiming. They'll just, obviously, you know, if you're familiar with like marketing and stuff, you know, they'll find a niche and just focus on that niche, and then that niche is probably the best return on investment. In terms of older people, yeah, so like they are laggards in a sense. So if you look at different communities, the older software. So for instance, Facebook is probably older than Twitter in terms of like cultural relevance. So the user group, so Twitter was aimed at, you know, college kids, right? And then it proliferated along the younger kids. I remember I was using it quite a lot when I was like maybe 15, 16. And then obviously as I grew older, I started to use Twitter more. But then I noticed a lot of boomers, old people, were using Facebook, and now like the demographics have changed. I think I've tweeted about this recently, and yeah, so demographics have changed, and I think this is what's happening with Twitter. So a lot of people are saying Twitter is declining or whatever, but what we're noticing is that it's cultural. Um, Basically, the culture of Twitter is changing because people of Twitter are changing, demographics are changing. So you're gonna have all these different, you know, cultural groups in silo. Uh, operating all at once. Um, so I think that's a huge part of it. I think yeah, I think there will be different like target groups um, all at once. It's going to be, so for instance, like Facebook memes with boomers, they have their own in-group culture, and there's going to be like these different tribes based on, cohorts in a sense. I don't know, I'm kind of spitballing.
No, I think that's really plausible, and I feel like it's borne out by the facts. It's pretty clear that people who are like older millennials, Gen X, are all on Twitter, all this newfangled stuff. Like I'm definitely in the elder millennial category, so I'm never gonna open TikTok. So it's clear that there's a stratification. I think it's also it's once you're about 30 something, you kind of crystallize naturally. Your fashion sense kind of stagnates, and your music taste kind of stagnates as well. I mean, ideally it doesn't, but at least in my case it has, and I can see this in the sample size that I have around me as well. So yeah, it's I think it's a very, I think the theory has legs, and I don't know, I'm curious how these new tools are going to influence the memes and the culture that is forming, because I mean I don't understand TikTok very well, as being a bit of a boomer myself. I isn't it just kids dancing and people trying to get you onto OnlyFans?
Yeah, there is a huge part of it. I mean, I suppose the same kind of thing with Twitter as well. So it's so I don't know. It's based in mimicry, which is very fascinating. So there's huge groups of people. So there'll be like a song, right, and there'll be like these trends. So in a sense, it's like a trend. It focuses a lot on trends. So there'll be like this dance that people do, that all the kids are doing, and then people will copy that in different environments. They'll iterate slightly, and they'll add a certain innovation to it. And in a sense, it's like memetic evolution at a very fast pace. So there's these trends that come and go, and they're facilitated by the algorithm that pushes these into your feed, and then people will make these kind of trends follow. And obviously there is a like sales funnel into the pornography market, and but the thing is that I think that's Twitter can be used in the same kind of fashion, that you can trend certain things, get it viral, and link it to your prostitution page. But at the same time, like there is huge aspects of it that are very, I wouldn't say wholesome, but they're not like, they don't have that in mind. But also again, like humans are, they dedicate a lot of resources into acquiring sex, and um, to go to that end goal of sexual reproduction in a sense. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm curious how, because essentially this, like you said, TikTok is almost like an explicitly mimetic environment, but all social media is quite mimetic. And then you kind of have this layer of sex work and destigmatizing sex work, and online sex work for all. This is the new side gig that people should have. I mean, to me, that's that's a little bit worrying, because I'm a terrible whorephobe. So it's at least this is the new terminology, and I'm adopting it. I'm
Wow.
getting ahead of the curve. But there's maybe it's just me. I mean, I feel like it's quite dystopian to think that
Interesting.
in the future, all of our daughters will just be like, I don't know.
Oof.
I don't know, having a side gig sending cooter shots to people.
Damn.
That's not. I don't see it well, and I feel like it might have downstream consequences, but that may be just me, being a stuck up old broad.
No, I don't think it's a age thing. I think it's a very much a cultural thing. So there are like young communities out there that are totally against, this sexual liberal kind of view on the world, and they're totally against that, OnlyFans, and definitely we're seeing it online as well. There's huge sways. I can't remember the correct pronounce it, but there's quite a lot of people that are on Twitter that are young, Zoomer age, like around 18, that totally align with your worldview, and totally agree with your dismay at the trend of young kids. And I think there's an over focus on it. So there is a lot of people that are doing that, but I think it's a selection bias as well to a certain degree. Is it being pushed by certain cultural entities? I think so, definitely. I think that's a fair statement to make. There is a push for it, and you know people are using political um, leverage in a sense to push for that kind of ideology, and it is an ideology. It's not all these things about liberation sense are ideological in nature. But so yeah, it's very much a battle of ideologies that are going on. Um, I don't I think it's just a youth thing. I think there will be, in a sense, there already is a resurgence of people that are trying to be more traditional, or in a sense. But I think people also got to realize that what's traditional 5 years ago was progressive 10 years ago, and so on. Maybe I'm making the example a bit, extreme, but yeah, essentially a lot of the time it's you got to take things into a larger context. I yeah, I think that's more or less it on that subject. Um, is it a larger trend? I wouldn't say so. I mean, there is certain parts of it that are pushing towards it, but again, like if everyone's sending something that anyone can get access to for free, I don't see it as a sustainable kind of business market. It's very much like influencer marketing, or creating a business on the internet. If there's a lot of people that are quickly able to you know mimic your business, in a sense, you have no, from a business standpoint, it doesn't make sense for that to happen. I mean, a larger cultural context as well, like there are huge repercussions embedded within human nature that I suppose have a sort of disgust mechanism against this kind of stuff. So I don't think, from those two aspects, I don't think it's I think there will definitely be some sort of undercurrent of it, and I think there'll be some people that are going to be prominent in society that will reflect that kind of nature. But I don't think there'll be a case of almost everyone doing it. But I think it's also good to remember that I think maybe in Renaissance Italy, I can't remember where, but someone said to me that like 20% of the women of a certain time period in Italy, I can't remember if it's Italy or somewhere else, but essentially they said the figure of around 20 to 25% of women were all prostitutes. This is something to definitely look at. I may be completely wrong, and I'm just
Yeah.
talking random shit, but it's definitely, and that's a figure like to think about. Maybe that's true, maybe it's not. It's something to look into. I definitely suggest people to look into it. I want to look into it right now, actually, see if it's actually true or not. But yeah, so I think there is, and people call it the oldest profession, but the thing is, it's like it's also one of the professions that's cross-culturally shamed and put under the rug. And I think it goes into a wider, larger sense of like morality and cultural norms. I think as a society, there should be certain upheld cultural norms that protect society in a larger sense, that promote a certain kind of lifestyle. And that's a fact of nature, in a sense that that's already happening even in a quote unquote liberal society. So people talk about free speech, but if you say the wrong thing, you're going to go to jail. So does free speech even exist? And what like, so then it's very much a contradiction of what a lot of people say. If people say, "Oh, let people do what they want," but then if you say, "I don't want to do X," they're going to rebel against you. So they are on contradiction to themselves. So I think that's another thing to take into mind. Me personally, yeah, I'm not a fan of it. Um, but also I'm also like trying to judge it from a different type of perspective, like more of a first principles perspective. I don't think it's going to be a huge trend. I don't, like, again, it goes back to what I was saying. It's going to be multiple simultaneous societies existing with different ideological beliefs. That's already happened. That's already the case now. There's not going to be like a global government. I don't think that's plausible to control 7 billion people. Um, it's very hard to do. Um, you know, yeah, and I don't think that's a good idea, anyways, because a lot of people are going to have very different decisions and opinions about things. It's not scalable at all. So
Yeah.
neither is the increasing. Um, what seems to be an increasing phenomena, but I think it's just like it's just being pushed by certain narratives. A lot of people are going to make mistakes, you know, as to that kind of lifestyle, but they'll eventually see, you know, the actual truth, and it comes back to this whole perennial truth kind of nature and sense. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's the only robust thing that we have is, timeless truth, especially about human nature. Yeah, you can't really escape those for too long. Um, yeah, I think you're right. I think the thing that is a bit worrying is that, like you said, things are happening really fast. These are technologies that have like supernormal stimuli of the caliber that we haven't seen before. And what's special about OnlyFans is not just that it sends you porn. I guess it's the kind of that parasocial relationship component where you kind of have a
yeah.
pool of men. They're all competing to talk to this girl. They're all kind of outbidding each other to get a sweet message from her. And it's
I don't think that's entirely true. So there are examples of that, and that's what people will have a bias towards. They'll people have a bias of selecting things that are you know, very, what's it called? Like it's essentially selection bias. So they have, like, they don't see the failures, and the vast majority, I'd say 99.9% of people that have an OnlyFans account don't make money on it. There are graphs of this. You know, you can, guys, if anyone's listening, you can literally go and Google like the graph, and it's steep as hell. Like it's literally
yeah,
flat, and then there's a huge spike. And I think, you know, top 1% makes more than 99.99% of revenue on
yeah, even
OnlyFans, and they
lower.
promote it.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's top 0.1% that makes 99% of the income. It's like Pareto times 1,000. It's quite super super steep. Like it almost is stuck to the graph. You barely see the graph because it's
Yeah,
essentially.
and this is crazy because like that's an extreme. Like if you wanna if you wanna push that and promote that, you're gonna have this huge gig economy that's it's gonna be worse than Amazon. Amazon is the least regulated to some degree, um, and you know Amazon, you know, has some sort of value that's has a moat, and you know they have a business model that can't be very easily replicated. But if you're just selling pictures of feet, all right, it's like anyone could just take pictures of their own feet, but then you also got like brand it and create a moat, and then you know it's a lot difficult. It's a lot more difficult than people think. And if a person was to do that, then I'll just think that, you know, they hadn't really thought about the long-term consequences, and there will be consequences. You know, everything that you do online is going to be like I'm pretty sure like people have downloaded my Twitter archive and everything I've tweeted, you know, pretty regular interval. I've downloaded my archive a lot as well. So like everything you do online is like you should just basically have the kind of mindset that it's going to be online forever. You're going to die, and you know everything that you post is going to be a public record. And then you know somebody like Microsoft might make a chatbot by you know scraping all your data.
Oh Jesus. I don't think anyone would want that chat, but yeah, it's a nice dystopian vibe to all of this stuff. But yeah, it's coming. I mean, it's already here.
Yeah, it's already here. Yeah, future's already here, but it's not evenly distributed. Yeah, so yeah, that is definitely an interesting thing. I mean, the whole chatbot thing is very interesting to talk about because I've definitely been trying to do that. So I've been basically playing around with scraping my own tweets and then trying to generate more tweets from that data set. And that's just been a very interesting exercise of seeing how I think and how I change over time. But in terms of like death, yeah, then it completely it doesn't fuck up, but like it reinvents basically what is this whole notion of death. And I think it's very important to talk about because it, in a sense, you know, it is my internal motivation for a lot of things. And yeah, it's a very interesting topic. Will it change the relationship between people have with dead people? Yeah, I think it will. It's going to definitely change something.
Yeah, for
And it's
sure.
going to happen. It's going to happen slowly. So, and because what happens now is like on Facebook, if someone dies, you can tell Facebook that person's died, and they'll set up like a eulogy, a memorial page, or whatever. And that's quite. It's quite interesting. I don't know if it's gruesome or not, but it's definitely something to wonder about. And I've had a few friends die, and like I can just visit a certain web page, and I can just like read their eulogy again, and think about that. And even I can go through their tweets. I remember I've got a few friends that died that I knew through Twitter, and like sometimes I'll find myself just scrolling through their tweets, and yeah, it's just seeing how quickly could it go, and how people don't realize how quickly you can go,
Yeah.
and the shortness of life. Yeah, I was reading one guy. I found out he died. He was a graphic designer. Cannot remember his name, which is really bad of me. I feel pretty bad about it. But essentially, yeah, like he was tweeting things, and like he was saying, "Oh, I'm in hospital. I'm okay now." It was back and forth, and then the news came out that he died, and yeah, I was just going through his like timeline and then seeing all the messages, and I don't think Twitter yet has a function of like letting people know they're visiting a dead person's account, and I've set up certain bots to run, indefinitely, through servers of Google, um, basically to like tweet after I died, and they just tweet like a selection of my best tweets, or they'll link my other bots to tweet after I've died. And I definitely had that kind of like idea in mind of, you know, um, like yeah, tweeting after you died. It's like it's almost haunting in a sense, but it's very interesting at the same
It
time.
is like
Because we already have like bots of dead people, right? So we have like the Nietzsche bot, or the bot of like Abraham Lincoln or something, right? It's but they probably didn't live in an age where they thought that their entire body of text and thought would be a 280 character tweet.
yeah, but I mean, you could also argue that their books themselves are kind of haunting us, and
Yeah,
even like Marcus Aurelius, he's haunting
yeah,
us like 2,000 years from the grave. It's quite, this whole concept of posterity. I feel like we're still kind of hanging on to that a little bit. People still kind of want to be remembered, but yeah, I'm curious how it's gonna, how it's gonna transform now when, yeah, your whole life is just captured and you do it voluntarily because it's fun. It's a crazy one. I before I let you go, I wanted to ask you the question of the show because we have that. It's, do you have a person, living or dead, a subversive thinker that people have, either don't know about or you think should be more widely known? It could be a book or someone who's just, has some good ideas that should be known that are not known.
interesting. So I think interesting. Let me think for about a couple of seconds. I have one guy in mind. He's but I don't know if you'll be able to get him on a podcast. But there is a guy called Chiron 01, and that's his at. It's a Chiron, Kairon 01, which are both in numbers. So he like me and him. I've talked to him, and we're pretty cool. We've known him for quite a while, and a lot of things like he talks about, I talk about as well. We have huge overlaps in interest. Yeah, I think he's a good guy to check out. Um, but he's more like technological in a sense. I'm going in a different direction. I think he's a not techno optimist either, but he definitely, I don't know. We need to, I suppose, invent a new term or something, or there's already a term probably around.
Yeah,
But essentially,
techno-realism.
yeah, that's a good one. So we definitely see the benefits of it, and we also see the negatives of it. So he's a good person to check out. I'm just thinking because I like to collect, people that are low key but like very interesting. So I've got a few people in mind. I've got quite a lot of people in mind. Like I try to like create lists, but yeah, he's definitely one I like on a small scale. He's only got about 2,000 followers, but there's quite a lot of people that are low key that are very interesting. I'm just trying to find someone that I talk to on a regular basis that I know very well, and that isn't so hingent on bias. Because there's a lot of interesting people think they're interesting, but they're not. They're just a different type of ideology, and their thinking skills are probably redundant. I'm just trying to find someone.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like a lot of the really big accounts on Twitter and everywhere are just kind of very polished avatars of trendy ideologies, because they don't really say anything, disruptive. They just kind of repackage stuff, like the Candace Owenses of the world. And I mean, that's what people want to see. They want, they want mirrors of themselves, and just a bit more of a refined mirror. I think that's what sells.
Okay, yeah. So there's another guy that I'm very good friends with,
Hmm.
and his name. I don't know if he wants to let people know his name, but his Twitter at I can send it to you later. But it's Ahimsa Satya is his Twitter name. He's a trader, and his account is pretty low key. He's a very nice guy. He's got less than 1,000 followers. Um, and yeah, he like I'm trying to find the most like niche kind of thinkers that are not easy to define. If you're easy to define, I think it's like you're not thinking hard enough, because you're too stagnant in your thought, and you like having an ideology. So he's a trader, and a lot of his trading ideology comes from mimesis, the Girardian, not memetics, the Darwinian. But yeah, so he's basically applying that. But the thing is, he doesn't really do that in a larger scale. So he definitely has other different views. I think someone that's large scale that's actually underrated is Jim O'Shaughnessy. He's a big account, and he's been very successful in his career, etc. But like I've had like quite intimate conversations with him, and he's very much like us, that he's very into collecting people, not collecting thinkers that are not easy to find because they're not out there per se. So he has like this huge kind of compendium of things that you can of people that are very niche thinkers, and he totally do the due diligence in a sense that I remember I was tweeting a book that's by I can't remember her name, Susan Blackmore or something, and it was a very niche book on memetics about from 30, 40 years ago. Most people don't know about it. And like I was tweeting about it, and then I saw him tweet about it because he follows me, and he was interacting about me memes with me, and I was this was back when I used to talk about memes, memetics. So in a sense, yeah, he's an underrated thinker, even though he's very like he's got a large profile, about 100,000 followers, but like he's very interested in people that think outside the box, that are subversive thinkers, as you would call it. Um, those are a few people. I think one way to like find out is if a person's a unique thinker or not is it's like they'll usually have a model of how people think, and that model would come from like first principles rather than like an ideological framework, say X is good or X is Y because um someone said so in a book.
Mm.
So like it's very like they've done the groundwork of trying to find certain things that are in a sense truths or what they think is truths. So they've got like an axiomatic model. Um, I'm really interested in like finding these kind of people as well.
Yeah.
Um,
And I feel like, your account is a good place for people to find them, because I feel like you engage with people quite a lot, and yeah, you don't shy away from recommending, and yeah, just kind of engaging with.
yeah, definitely. I have some like tweets that I've put out of people under like 100 followers that I find interesting. I even reach out to people like with like 20 followers, and if I like some of their tweets, I'll say like you should tweet more. There's quite a lot of them. I haven't really been delving into them as of late. Um, there is a yeah, there's quite a lot of people. I think you should try to find people that don't just post memes, and they have hard to define like stances. I think that'll probably be a good place to start to find interesting, out the box thinkers. And there is quite a lot on Twitter.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely agree. It's the place to be. I'm still a bit of a noob, but yeah, I found quite an amazing array of super smart people.
I think I found another guy. Sorry, I just there's a guy with 55 followers. Um, his Twitter is mf_bit, and me and him have talked. He's another finance dude. He just retweets. He doesn't tweet as much, but like the conversations we had are pretty interesting. And there's definitely other people that I've hit up and try to get them to tweet more, just because I like their tweets. Oh yeah, there's another guy called Sue. His Twitter is @SU, and that is it. So
Ah, is it an early account? I guess. Yeah. I don't know.
yeah, I had a conversation with him. He helped me out. It's pretty cool. There's so many people that are willing to help you out on Twitter. It's crazy. I really like Twitter people. Well, the ones I interact with anyway.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's been quite a miraculous place for me as well. Yeah, it's great, and yeah, happy to meet people like you and chat about the world.
Likewise.
Cheers. Well, thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure.